Okay. Alright. So welcome back to a new session. And please scan this QR code to check attendance. Before we go into okay, just scan the QR code first. Sure. So before we go into today's workshop, I'm just gonna spend about 10 minutes to talk about project dev. So you guys probably have seen this or haven't scanned? Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to spend 10 minutes to talk about project dev. So you guys probably have seen this in our Telegram or Discord channel about it. And basically this is going to be a semester to a year-long initiative, and someone has already pitched their ideas, so they're currently looking for teammates. So the main activity for this will happen after recess week. So after recess week is going to be, if you're interested in joining as their team, okay, after recess week is going to be the main development timeline. So you're going to start developing the game that you have joined. So if you're interested in joining, right, you can ask your questions on the Discord channel, on the Discord server, in the Join Project Dev channel. So the project head, I should say, is going to reply to you if you have any questions for them. And these are the games that have been pitched this year for Project Dev. There are 8 games in total. So there's most of these publicity materials you can already find in the Telegram and Discord server. So if you're interested in any one of them, you can check it out. And once you finish this workshop, you should have enough knowledge to help them out. Okay, and you can also learn under them to learn about how you can become a better game developer in general. So if you feel like you want to put yourself up to some challenge and you want to really push yourself forward to potentially make more games in the future, this is going to be a very good program for you to join. Okay, so the sign up link is here for Project Dev. If you're interested, you can scan now. If you are still considering the links and all are still in our Telegram group, just be sure that you sign up before next Sunday so that the team head will be able to look through and then potentially schedule a time to discuss things with you. Okay? So aside from that, we are also recruiting for Exco. So if you're interested in taking up a leadership position, you want to share your love for games and the design, or you want to help other members of the group actually, help other members in the group to make more games, or you want to grow the prevalence of game development in US and in Singapore, you can join us in the Exco team. And currently we are looking for these few positions. Hello. So the first one is Industry Relations Director. So this one you're going to be in charge of contacting companies that is currently in the industry. So usually in our list we have companies like Ubisoft, Riot Games, large companies, usually these two are, and then Hoyoverse as well. So if you're interested in making relationship with these large companies in the industry, right, you can do so. You can join us and try to get this position. We have the Community Engagement Director, which is generally going to be hosting events internally in the club, as well as to engage with members that ask questions on Telegram, on Discord, or email us. Okay, secretary, which will be in charge of most of the proposals in the club. web developers. So we actually have a NUS website, NUS GDG website, as well as websites used for our annual GameCraft Game Jam. So these will need to be maintained, and we also have some positions for that. And workshop hits. Workshop hits are usually not really a full exco position. So if you're interested in joining it as a workshop head, you're also going to have to take up a second exco position. But that's yeah, you can think about that afterwards. So workshop heads will be mainly responsible for teaching workshops, like I do, and there's also the Godot workshop there, and also the music workshop and the art workshop, but they're not excos in general. Yeah. So if you are interested in teaching Unity or Godot workshop, or you are interested in teaching art, music, design workshops, or probably you have some expertise in Unreal, I don't know, you can join as a workshop head and teach other members in the group on how to use these utilities. So that's about it to start off. And if you haven't scanned the QR code, please do so to check attendance. Yeah. Is there any question about the project dev and the exco recruitment? Okay, I don't believe so. Has everyone scanned the QR code? Alright, good. So let's get started with our workshop today. Hold on a second. Okay, so there's a blank page here for no reason. So let's just go through what we're going to be talking about today. So today's workshop will be a little bit on the more complex side. So we're actually moving slightly deeper into the Unity system. So we're gonna go with instantiating objects first. So instantiating object is essentially creating game objects in the game scene using scripts, and it's gonna happen only during runtime. So for now, what we're doing is just dragging and dropping game objects into the scene so that it appears in the scene, but sometimes you'll probably want to instantiate objects instead. So for example, what if when you hit a button, the player would shoot a bullet, right? But the bullet, you probably don't want it to just hang around by the player all the time. So in some cases, you're going to have to generate these objects during runtime, such that the bullet is going to only get generated in the game scene when you click on the button. So that's instantiating objects. We're going to get into how you can use it. And then animations, which is how you can give your game a little bit more aesthetic looks. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with instantiating game objects. So now you're gonna get back to Unity again. And I actually just realized that a lot of people did not have this set up. So if you go to your edit and you go down to preferences, right? There's this something called external tools that allows you to change your external script editor to Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. I remember that this is supposed to be set up once you install the modules related to it, but apparently Unity stopped doing that, which is why a lot of people did not have the color coding and IntelliSense. But if you set this up here and you click on regenerate project files, right, it should show up with all the autocomplete and stuff like that if you have Visual Studio. That is on my part. I forgot to account for that in the first session. Alright, so with that out of the way, we can get back to coding. So we want to instantiate a game object here. So let's start with potentially give this player some sort of an ability to shoot bullets when I click on the left mouse button. So in order to do that, we need two things. The first one is to detect the input, whether or not the left mouse button is being clicked down. And if it's clicked down, I want to shoot a bullet. So in order to do that, the first thing we want to do is to create a bullet. And unfortunately, in this asset pack, we don't actually have like a bullet, but we have something that looks like a bullet, so we can just use that. So if you go into sprites and you go into where was it? I believe it's decorations. Okay, it's not decorations. Wait, hang on. Oh, it's in VFX. Okay, so in VFX you see this glowworm one, which is just a yellow pile here. But if you put it in, okay, if you put it in the game scene, you drag it around, and say you rotate this by 90 degrees. Yeah, it looks like some sort of laser bullet. Okay, I'm not going to question that, but we're gonna use this for our bullet choice today. So you're just going to get the glowworm by going into VFX, and then rotate this by 90 degrees. Now we can rename this object here. You can rename this object here as bullet, so no one's going to question its existence. So now that once we have done that, since we are going to potentially have like maybe tens or hundreds of bullets being instantiated or being in the game scene at once if you spam click, so what we are going to do is to make this a prefab, so that it's possible for us to have the same bullet over and over again. Alright, so now that we have a bullet object, the next thing to do is to give this bullet some sort of property. So what property should a bullet have? Can anyone make a guess? Yes.
It's when it collides with something.
It wants to collide with something.
Then that thing disappears or dies, or depending on the animation.
Okay, correct. So it needs to collide with something. So the bullet needs to have a collider. So let's do that. So we're gonna go into here and add. We're just gonna go into this prefab bullet here and click on add component. And we want this to have a collider. So again, we're just gonna use a box collider 2D here. And if you double click on it, you're going to see that the hitbox is not fitting to the bullet size. So we're just going to change the collider here as well. Okay, in case you guys, if you don't know how you can get out this scene, right, it's double clicking the prefab object. It brings you to here. So you're just gonna change the collider size down so it fits this yellow sprite. Right, can we follow? Yes. Okay, so once we have this collider here, once you have resized it, you can leave the prefab by clicking on this back button here. So inside of this scene, right, any changes you make to this object is going to be reflected to all the bullet instances in the game scene. So it's kind of like a master pipe. Okay, if you change it, everything's gonna change. So once you've done that, we're kind of still missing a little bit of properties to a bullet. So not only it's gonna collide with something and do something with that object it collided with, it probably still have some other properties.
It also has to disappear.
What? It will disappear?
Yeah, like once it collides with something.
Yeah, okay. Aside from colliding.
Constant horizontal speed.
a constant horizontal speed, correct? So we need it to have some sort of speed. And to do that, we are also going to need to have a rigid body to the we also need to have a rigid body to the component. So make sure that when you do the changes, you actually select the prefab object, and it shows prefab asset here before you make the changes. If you do it on the game scene, it's not gonna get reflected across all the bullet prefabs in the game. So since it's supposed to have a constant horizontal speed, and we probably don't want a bullet to kind of follow gravity, right? So in order to do that, we can either change the body type from dynamic to kinematic, but that would be a little bit troublesome because sometimes we probably want it to have some level. We probably want to have some level of control with some other stuff. So for now, we are going to change the gravity scale to 0. And this means that this bullet object is not going to be affected by gravity, and therefore it will not fall down. So we can, this is a quick try, and you can see that this bullet object here is just going to stand still, and it's not going to get affected by gravity.
Where's the gravity scale?
Okay, it's inside the rigid body 2D component, and there's the gravity scale here. So you want to change it to 0.
I can find it.
Okay, so you need to go to the bullet prefab. Okay, you click on it. And first you need to add a rigid body 2D component. And once you've done that, inside rigid body 2D, as long as your body type is dynamic, you should see the gravity scale there.
Oh, dynamic.
Yes, correct. So is everyone still following?
And gravity scale is 0, right?
Correct. Okay, good. So now that this is not affected by gravity, we probably still need to give this a speed. And as we have learned in previous sessions, the easiest way to do this is to write some script so that we can give this a behavior. So let's get back to script, and we're gonna create a new C# script, and we're gonna call this bullet behavior. And click on enter. So this should create a bullet behavior script, and just double click to open up Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So let's start giving this some property. So as mentioned, we are going to need to have a constant horizontal speed. So let's do that by, first of all, reference the rigid body 2D component so that we have access to changing the velocity component of this object. And when the script starts, we reference this with get component rigid body 2D, and we give this a velocity value. So for now, we're just gonna hard code this as 5 float. Okay, sorry. So we're just going to give this a 5 float, which means it's going to move in the x direction for 5 units per second. Yes. Looks a bit dark. Okay, are we following? So at this point, you go back to Unity. You are going to attach the bullet behavior script onto the bullet, because the script class can be found. There's a compile error. think there's a compile error. Huh. That's weird. Um, okay, I think something went wrong with Unity's importing there. Okay, good. So we're gonna go back to our bullet in the prefab object, and we're going to add the bullet behavior script onto the component, onto the object. Yeah, sometimes Unity kind of bugs out with the script compilation. So the easiest way to fix it is to change something, save it, and change it back so that it recompiles the script.
So to get into the prefab bullet.
Yes, the prefab bullet.
You just click add components.
And type in bullet behavior. And you're going to see the script pop up. So you can attach it. So now let's try it out and see if this actually has a horizontal movement speed. Okay, it does. So now we essentially already gave this a constant horizontal movement speed. And maybe we want it to do something else, which is going to, well, kind of like destroy itself after it hits something, right? So for that, we're going to use the on collision enter 2D event. As an incorrect signature. Hold on. Oh, come on. Yeah, okay. There's a collision 2D. Sorry. So essentially this event will be called, so this method will be executed whenever this object collides into something else. Okay, it collides into something with a collider, for instance. So when it hits something, we want the bullet to disappear, as mentioned. So to do that, all we need to do is to just destroy. So calling destroy game object is just going to destroy this game object that the script is attached to. In this case, it's the bullet. So when it enters, well, when it collides with something else, the bullet destroys itself. It's just that simple. So in order to test this out, I'm going to move the bullet to somewhere here so that it collides with this ground. We're gonna see that if this works or not. Okay, now the bullet is gone. So now that we have this very simple kind of we have this very simple script setup, right? We want to have a way for the player to actually shoot a bullet when we click down the left mouse button, right? So to do that, we are once again going to create a new script, and we're gonna call this player shoot. So after you have created this new script called player shoot, you're gonna open it up. So for here, we want to check when the player presses down the left mouse button. So we're going to do a condition check here if input.get key down, and the key code for left mouse button is key code.mouse 0. So if the key code mouse 0 is pressed, we want to shoot a bullet. And how do we know what is a bullet object? In this case, we need to specify this by using a serialized field, private game object, and we're gonna call this bullet. So now we have a way for this script to know what a bullet object is. And here comes the fun part, which is every time I click on my left mouse button, I want to create a new bullet. And all I need to do is to just is to type instantiate bullet. So this tells Unity that to create a bullet, every single time I press down my left mouse button. So let's make sure that this works by going back into Unity. Okay, I'm going to go to player. And I'm going to add this player shoot script onto this. So you're going to notice that I actually added this onto the non-prefab player object. And this is something that you're going to do quite often. And
I see the script.
the script.
Also, did you do you delete the entire like first chunk of the given like the initial code?
Void start, yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So. Okay.
So usually I'm just going to delete things that I don't use. In this case, because we probably don't want this script to do anything when the game starts, so I'm just going to delete it. It keeps the code clean. Well, somewhat. Okay, are we still following?
And sorry, could you remind me again? What does the instantiate function do?
Okay, so it just creates a new object at runtime.
Okay.
So actually I have a slide about it. Yeah, it's just creating a new object. So actually, internally Unity likes to call it a clone, but for now you just think about it as creating a new object. So every object that you have created is going to run the same scripts that has been attached to it. It's going to go through the same cycle. So it's going to call start and it's going to continue with the update and whatnot. Okay, so yeah, that's not too important. So now you go back to the Unity editor, you select your player prefab object, and you can add this script onto it. So if you've noticed that here I actually have like some sort of blue line around. And the reason for that is because you're adding new properties onto a prefab object. And this prefab object, this property that you've added is only going to be applied on this particular scene. So in order to kind of apply what you have done to this object in this scene to all the prefab objects, all you need to do is to click on this prefab overrides and you select apply all. Now you'll notice that this score text is not there yet. It's completely fine. Okay. The reason for that is because this text is not a prefab and you cannot reference a non-prefab item for a prefab script. Okay, that's going a little bit too deep. So now you're gonna go to your prefab folder that has this bullet, and you're just gonna drag and drop this into this bullet here onto the player. So save it, and you're gonna click on play. And now, as I click on the left mouse button, a new bullet gets created. But it does not look like where I want this to be. Right, so it's just there. Logically speaking, the bullet should get instantiated in front of the player, right? So where the player is facing. So in order to do that, we can change. The reason why it instantiates there is because it's just going to instantiate whatever this bullet prefab has in its property. And the property of it is that the transform is at this position, which is just here. So every time it creates a new bullet object, it's going to appear there. And we don't want that to happen because it does not look good. Well, it's not supposed to behave like that in the first place. So we want to change the starting position of the bullet to be in front of the player. And in order to do that, what we want to do is what we have done similarly to how we have attached the player feet to know where our feet is. We're going to attach a new empty that is called a player hand. Okay, so this is where the bullet is gonna come out. So once you have done that, you want to go back to the game scene and make sure that it is like somewhere in front of the player. Maybe here. Okay. So, yeah, maybe here. So now that we have a location as to where the bullet is supposed to come out, okay, in the script, we internally want to know where the player hand is. So we're just going to create a new serialized field for a player hand. So now we have a way of knowing where the player hand is. But we still don't actually have a way of letting the bullet know where it's supposed to be. And to do that, we're just going to utilize this instantiate function. Okay, we're just gonna utilize this instantiate function from Unity. It takes in a couple of overload, but most of it is not really important until you really want to get into it. So we're just gonna do player hand position here, and it requires you to specify a rotation. We're not gonna care about it for now. So we just want to put quaternion.identity. So this is going to make sure that the object gets spawned with a transform rotation value of 0, 0, 0. Okay. So let's save the script. Okay, I'm gonna put this here for a second. Okay, are we good? Good. Okay, so now we can get back to the player, and you can see that there is a player hand here. So we're just gonna drag and drop this in. So now, as we click on it, you're gonna notice that, okay, the bullet spawns at the correct position, but it gets destroyed immediately because it collides into the player. So, and that, well, that's not really that great because we don't want our player to actually absorb its own bullet. And one of the easiest way to fix this is gonna go quite deep into Unity's system, so I'm not gonna do that. And in fact, we are just going to make sure that we do a check. So instead of this being on collision enter 2D, we probably want the bullet to be able to pass through the player, correct? So that, you know, friendly fire won't happen. It's not gonna collide onto the player and then the bullet just disappear. That's not very good. So we're going to replace this with a private void on trigger enter 2D. And remember, last time we actually gave this player a tag. Okay, we did not, but we can give it a tag later. So if collider.gameObject.tag, okay, is equals to player. So when it is equals to player, we don't want it to do anything. Which means negating this statement, if it is not equal to player, we want it to destroy itself. Sorry. So this should be here, I believe. Correct. So if the collider.gameObject.tag is not equals to player, actually, yes, here. Gotta be confused. So if the collider.gameObject.tag is not equals to player, we're going to destroy this game object. And now we can remove this. Okay, are we following? This is good.
Could I get some help overall, please?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, so I'm keeping up with the recording, but one thing I got lost in was adding all the numbers to the players. It's the bullet, so I'm using the that's all I'm doing. I still need to like catch on to like attaching and bold behaviors to the player behaviors and the hands.
Okay, so bullet behavior should be set. It's here, right?
Yeah.
But the player shoot script should be on there.
Oh, okay, so I just dropped that up there again.
Yes, so you gotta remove this first.
Okay.
And you go to player. And add player shoot script. Now you can go back to the player, and once you scroll down to here, onto the bullet, you want to into the bullet.
Oh.
And you also want to specify what the hand is. The hand is in the correct position. So then get back to player, you scroll down, just have a review for the hands.
Oh. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, so yes.
Okay, because this one you actually still get on combination. So we'll just change the trigger differently. And this is a collider to
So if the game object is not a player object, we are just going to ignore doing anything. If it is not a player object, we're just going to destroy it. But if it is a player object, we are going to ignore. So now we are going to get back here and go to the bullet prefab and change the collider to a trigger collider. So all you need to do is to go to the box collider 2D and tick the is trigger checkbox. Now this is a trigger collider and it should go through everything. The final thing we need to do is to give this player a tag. So we're gonna tag this player as player. So once you tag the player as player, the game will know that this is a player. And as we play, you can see that the bullet gets instantiated. Okay. But it also gets destroyed by this mushroom. So similarly, we just need to let it know that when it hits the mushroom, it shouldn't destroy itself. And remember, on the last session, we have given this mushroom a reward tag, so we are also going to just check for this. So if it's not a player, or it's not a... Actually, no, it's not or. So if it's not a player, and it is not a reward, okay, is going to have this destroy game object. Okay, so if it's not a player and it is not a reward, it's going to destroy itself. Let me just change the editor look a bit. So now if it hits something that is a player or is a reward, then it's going to not do anything. But if it hits something else, it's going to destroy itself. Okay, so let's test this out. All compiler errors. Is there a compiler error? Oh, there is. Why did I remove this curly brace here? Okay, compiler error fixed. Now let's play. And you can see that now it goes through the mushroom okay. And whether or not you want it to go through the spike is another matter that you should figure out when it comes to designing. So I'm not going to go into that. It's just a very similar process. So after we have done that, you're going to notice that the bullet that we have created here, well, it's not facing the correct direction. It is currently, the sprite is currently facing upwards. And that's because, remember, as we create this bullet prefab, right, we actually gave this some rotation. But as we instantiate it here, the quaternion.identity is actually equals to rotation 0, 0, 0. So this means that it's not being rotated. So we lose that Z rotation. And to fix this, you don't actually need to understand what this means. You just need to give this a quaternion Euler and specify it to 0, 0, 90. So this is going to instantiate the object with the rotation value of 0, 0, 90, which is going to look the same as how it was in the game right now. Okay, so now as we play the game, you can see that it's also facing the correct direction. So the bullet looks like a bullet now, it's horizontal. But as we turn over, the bullet is shooting in the wrong direction. So when it's supposed to be shooting here, I'm actually shooting to the right side. Okay, so let's find a way to fix this. And in order to do that, we are going to find a way to actually change the move speed of the bullet. So when we are facing right, we want it to shoot in the positive X direction. But when we are facing left, we want to shoot in the negative X direction. If that makes sense. Okay, so let's do that. And to do that, first of all, we need this bullet behavior, okay, to have a method here which is public, called setDirection. So for this one, right, we are just going to make this take in a boolean called is right. Okay, so if is right, if it's right, our velocity is going to be this. Else, our velocity is going to be negative. So notice that I remove this part from the start here so that it looks a bit more clean. Okay, so as we have a way of knowing whether or not the bullet is facing right or left, all we need to do is to get into here, our player shoot script. So here, I'm going to make sure that this instantiate actually tells us what the bullet object is. So we just need to add game object current bullet, car bullet, is equals to this that I have instantiated. So, and we want to know what direction we're facing. So we're just going to do if game object dot transform dot local scale dot x, right? Okay, is equals to -1, or you can put smaller than 0. We're going to set a Boolean value here. Okay, I'm not gonna set it here. So let's put it here. So bool is right is like this, and we can do is right equals false, and then else is right equals true. And then here, all we need to do is to do car bullet dot get component bullet behavior dot what was this again? Set direction is right. So this line of code is going to get the bullet behavior class, the script bullet behavior that is attached to the bullet that we have instantiated, and then calls the set direction method. Okay, are we still following? Okay, essentially this is just it. Okay, this is just it. I'm going to leave this here for another 30 seconds or so. I think it should be sufficient.
Can you show the set direction?
The set direction?
Again for a second.
Okay. Okay, good. Wait.
Can you go back to that?
Go back to the other script.
I have some there.
I would make sure that this is working. Actually, I haven't tried this script yet. Ah, okay, hang on. Is this is right object here? Give me a second. Let me debug for a bit. Mm, weird. Oh, guys, give me a second. I think something went wrong that I wasn't thinking about. It's right, it's true.
There's one thing I noticed is that like Braille doesn't recognize a British spelling of behavior, so it won't let me compile the code. So if you remove the U, it should let you compile. At least let me, because that wasn't my
Alright,
button.
it's usually fine, I think. That's still true as well. Okay, so it's the rigid body that is not being. There's something wrong with Unity. But does the bullet not have a rigid body? It does. Yeah, okay, it's the rigid body that's not. That's weird. Okay, I think it has something to do with this. Let me change this to a week and see if this works. Yeah, okay, that would work. So because it has something to do with Unity's script initialization sequence. So because I usually use awake, I was not expecting that bug to appear. Okay, but just change this start to awake and this should be fine.
What's the difference between start and awake?
Awake is called before start. So in this particular case, right, because as you click on this instantiate, right, up until this point, after set direction is called, there is a small chance that start is not going to get called yet, because it's not going to double check for that. But for all of the sequence of the script, any method to actually be called, right, await needs to be finished. So that is usually the more foolproof way. Okay, anyways, we just changed that to awake, and now you should see that this works. Sorry for the small problem. So now, the bullet shoots the right when I go to right, and if I go left, the bullet shoots left.
Can you go back to script?
Okay, can I remark the script? Actually, everything should be the same. We just change start to awake in the bullet behavior. The only change is here. Okay, we just scroll down. Yes. Usually 90% of the time you're gonna use start and it's gonna be fine. But because we have a setter here, and sometimes Unity would execute this setter before start is initialized. And in that case, because start is not initialized, it's going to not work. In a sense, start is only going to be initialized after the first frame update. Okay, so, and the reason why this doesn't work is because if you look at the player shoot script, right, all of this is being executed in the same frame, which means the next frame hasn't come, and therefore start hasn't been initialized yet.
Can you go back to the please?
Yeah, so for this, if we use awake here, it means that it's going to be called as soon as the object is initialized. Does that make sense? Yeah, start is going to be called on the next frame update. This is a bit confusing.
Sorry, I have no idea how, but now he's shooting left regardless of which way I'm facing.
Okay.
I have no idea how that happens.
So this might explain. So these people are not shooting the X because the X.
Oh my god.
Save.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, are we good with this? We're almost officially done with this.
Oh.
Yes.
My thing does not like actually shoot for some reason. Like
You're gonna shoot for some reason. Yeah, let's try. Let's go and see if the script is there. The script is there, okay, but you did not have the bullet here. So we need to add the bullet script. I need to add the bullet. Add the bullet inside. Then you also need to tell it what is that first. Save and go try it.
Sorry, one last question. How do you get rid of this bullet specifically so that
You just delete it.
I can just like this entire thing?
Yeah, just delete it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, now to clean up after our own mess, we're just going to delete this bullet from the scene. You just select it, press delete. So now the bullet is gone. Okay, we're almost done with this. And if you're wondering why we have a bullet, is because you can create your own enemy after this. But I'm not gonna go through that today. It's homework. It's good practice. Yes. What's the problem?
I think I missed something else. Still don't know.
This doesn't work. Okay, you have to input setup. Okay, it's okay. With the truth. Settings.
Okay, so
It's recorded.
yeah,
right?
it's recorded, correct.
Okay, thank you. And are we also going to do the camera follow thing?
The camera follow thing is actually here. So you just attach the camera to the player.
Oh,
Okay,
okay, I
follow
missed that part apparently. Okay, perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
so in case if you're wondering why we have bullet, is because it opens up the possibility for you to create an enemy, and it's quite similar to creating a player. There's gonna be some other things that are more specific to it, but I'm not gonna go into this today. It's gonna be good practice for you to figure out how to use Unity. So if you're interested in doing that, you can create it yourself throughout the week. I'm hoping that you guys have time. Sure. Okay, so now that we have the bullet, we are gonna go into today's main course, which is animation. And well, does anyone here not know what is an animation? Okay, so everyone knows what's an animation. So essentially, an animation in Unity, okay, much like animation in a lot of other places, it consists of keyframes. So keyframes are kind of like data values. So after a specific time, there is going to change the image that's shown. So for example, if you watch any video on YouTube right now, after like one over 60 seconds, okay, it's going to change an image so that it kind of looks like the entire thing is flowing. So the same thing is being applied here in Unity's animation. So you specify a keyframe, and if you tell it like every 5 milliseconds, I want to change how the player is looking, then Unity is going to change the image that represents, it's going to change the sprite, which is the image that represents the player, after every 5 milliseconds. Okay, and the animation will end as all the keyframes have been traversed at least once. So once it goes through the entire timeline, the animation stops. But of course, you can loop it so that it's just going to restart itself after it reaches the end. Okay, and also animations can trigger events, but this is a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to get into that today. So let's get back here, and we're going to start working with animation. So once we get into here, if you get back into Sprite from the asset pack that we have downloaded, and you go to Hero, you'll see that, well, there's a lot of things. But for now, we are just going to work with idle. Okay, we're just going to work with idle. So we have these 4 particular frames here. Okay. And let me think about what we're supposed to do again. Okay, sure. So we're going to go into this asset here, and we're going to create a new folder called animation. So open that folder up. And here we're going to right click create, and we're going to go down and create an animation here. So I'm going to call this player idle. Okay, so we have this player idle animation. But having just an animation is not enough for Unity. we also need to have an animator. So an animator is a controller that controls how the animation should look like for a game object. So for example, when the player moves, I want it to display the animation of the player moving. If the player is standing still, I want it to display the animation of the player standing still. So this is the job of the controller. And without a controller, we cannot make animations actually work in Unity. So, sorry. Okay, so now that we have this particular knowledge, we're just gonna go in here and create an animator. So right click, create, and if you scroll down, there is an animator controller. So you're just gonna create that, and we're gonna call this player. Cool. So now you're gonna go to the player, and you're going to attach this player animator onto it. Okay? But now it still doesn't do anything because we haven't actually tell it what animation it should be doing. So, in order to do that, we're going to go to Window, and if you scroll down to Animation, there is this particular thing called an animation. You want to open that up. Okay, it's in Window, Animation, Animation. Okay, click that to open it up. And then, at the same place, we are going to open up something called an animator.
Wait, how do we get there again?
Window, Animation, Animation. And also open up Animator. Okay, is that good? Alright, so you can see that I have Animator docked here. In case if you miss how you can do that, you can just drag this and then put somewhere. Okay, but that is not really important. So for this, right, okay, I would usually put my animator docked by the game side. Okay, so in this animation, we are going to create a new animation clip. Okay, but we don't have to because we already did here. So we just need to select the player. Okay, we just need to select the player and then double click on player idle. So now, okay, you want to go to animator and you want to drag this player idle into the player's animator. So you can see that this is called player controller down here, which is the correct animator, and you want to drag and drop player idle into this here, into the animator window.
Like from the square at the bottom.
From the, yeah, so it's this thing, right? And you open it up, it's player controller, you drag and drop player idle inside of it. Okay? So you should see this entry to player idle and any state here. What this is not really important for now. I'm gonna get into them later. So once you've attached it, you can see that inside of the animation, when you select player, the player idle lights up. This means that we can start giving this player idle an actual animation. And to do that, I'm going to go back into our hero sprite here. Okay, notice that we actually have a lot of these assets, right? So all I want to do, since this is supposed to be the idle, I'm going to drag idle 1 into this animation window. Okay, this would be a bit hard to follow because it's not really intuitive to use. Okay, so you want to drag hero idle 1 into this animation panel.
It's not quite letting me.
It's not quite letting you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a huge problem. You need to have the player selected.
Okay, so if it's not letting you to drag a keyframe in, right? Make sure that you click on the player object in the game scene first, and you're gonna see this add property light up. Then you can drag and drop it in. Okay, this is the. Okay, I'll say this is the more non-intuitive part of Unity. It's not really well designed.
Wait, where do I drag the?
Okay, let me do this again. So you first have this animator and animation pane open, okay? And make sure that this animator already have this player idle animation dragged into it. Once you've done that, select the player object, and then you should see something light up here, and you go to your sprite folder here, you drag and drop something in. Now this would be part of the keyframe. Okay, you want to drag and drop the hero idols in. So what you can also do is to just select everything like this and drag and drop them. Okay, so in order to delete it, you just highlight and delete it, and then you can put all inside. So you want to make sure that all the hero idol animation is inside. So there's 4 keyframes here. You see 4 blue dots. Yes.
Still not letting me drag in.
Okay, so there's the player idle here. You go to player animation. Go to animation, this player idle. Down.
Is anyone lost? Okay, this is usually the main part where people get lost.
Yes.
Once every 0.1 second or something. Yeah, so if you zoom in too much, right, it's and you can drag and drop each one of the frames onto like a line. Yep. Okay, so now that we have done that, right? What this does is it's going to make sure that on entry it's gonna go straight into player idle animation. So if we click on play, okay, there is a very quick animation that happens onto the player. Do you guys see his hand moving? Okay, let's take a quick look. And the reason why it just stops there is because we haven't set this animation to loop. So we're just gonna get back to our animation here, select player idle, and click on loop time. That's it. Now as we play, you're going to see that this player is shaking up and down very violently.
I'm sorry, where do you click loop again?
You go to the player idle animation,
Yeah.
and you click on loop time in the property. it's still shaking. Okay, the reason why it shakes this violently is because right now the frame is updating every 0.1 second. As you can see here, it's updating very, very frequently. So we can change this by changing the duration of each keyframe transition. So if the time between two frames is longer, it means it takes longer to transition from this one image to that image. And it essentially makes this a little bit slow motion. So let's do that. And how you can do it is to zoom this out a bit. And you're going to select all of this and see this blue line here. If you click on it and you drag it, it's going to space it evenly apart. And we're just going to space this to about 0.15 here. So this means this takes about 0.05 seconds for each frame update. For each animation keyframe update. Okay, so now as we save it, you can click on play again. Okay, the player is, well, in a sense, kind of moving much slower now. But I'm not sure if you guys noticed. But if we play this slow motion, right, it will go to from this to this. Okay, sorry, I can't see the update here. Okay, so look at this guy on this left side, right? So it goes from this to this, to this, to this, and it immediately goes back. Which means the final frame here is not being, just look at this. So it just goes from here, and the transition from this to this is again 0.01 second. So we don't want that. We want to have kind of like a constant flow, so it looks a bit smoother. And this will be a bit more relevant when the animation is a bit slower, so that you kind of see that it just jumps over. So in order to do that, all we need to do is to attach the first keyframe, which is the Hero Idol one, to the very end of this, and keeping sure that this is 0.05 apart. So now the animation would stop at 0.20.
That says no.
Okay, you need to select the picture. Yes. Right. Always faster. Okay, now you just drag it over to 0.10. Thank you. Okay, if it still doesn't let you put the sprite, make sure you select the player. It's 99. Is the mistake 99% of Unity developers? Because this is really not a good system. Okay, so now let's look back at this, and you're going to see that the animation is a lot more smoother. Okay, it's just shaking like that. Good. Okay, so now you're going to notice that as we play, the animation is only going to be on idle. So as I move, it's still the same idle animation. And I'm gonna be honest, that doesn't really look nice. So when it walks, we probably want to have a walking animation instead of just shaking violently as we walk about. Right, so to do that, we're just gonna add more animation, and the process is fairly similar to what we did just now. So let's do this multiple times so that you can get used to it. So we go to animation, we right click create, we create a new animation, give this a name, we're going to call this player run, okay? So as the player moves, we want this animation to appear. So now you go to your animator, your player animator, you drag and drop player run into it. Okay, now you're going to double click on player run so that it shows up in this animation pane. And you're going to scroll down to the hero sprites here and locate where the run is. So there's 0 to 10. There's 1 to 10. Okay, now you're going to click on the player object in the game scene. And you're going to see that it goes back to player idle. Okay, we don't want that. So all you need to do is to click on player idle and change it to player run. The player idle is on this here. Change from idle to run. So now, as you have done that, make sure you click on player once again and you select the 10 sprites that you want to add, and then you drag and drop them all in. Okay, and for this animation, we're going to push this across 0.18 so that it's a bit more fast paced. And then the last thing to do is to put the first frame as the last frame and put it at the same interval, which is 0.20.
How did you multi-select the sprites to drag and drop?
Okay, you just shift click. You select one of this and you shift click to the last one, and all of them get selected at once.
Then
You just drag and drop, yes. So now to make sure that this actually looks good, I'm just gonna go to the first frame, and if you click on this play button here, you can see the animation preview being shown in the scene. Okay, is anyone lost?
how do you like drag them out? Like,
Okay, so you need to select all of them, right? And then you can click on this blue thing and it's gonna drag it back.
Has everyone gotten this working?
Mm-hmm.
No? Yes?
Sorry, how do you control to make it faster? Because I don't see more than million times, but which thing to do it.
How about I just how long I feel in
Thank you, control.
yeah. So how about I just how long the last few things?
So I think it's good now. So finally, what we can do for this, okay, is to go here. So this is what we call like a state diagram. It shows you like from which state can an animation transition from one state to another. So in this particular case, entry is the start, is like the starting of this player. So when the player starts, it's gonna be entry. And as entry state will directly get to player idle state. This means that the player animation is gonna start with player idle state. So we want to be able to get from the player idle state to the player run state, which means it's gonna go from the idle animation to the run animation. And to do that, we want to go to our player idle, right click, make transition, and you just see this arrow coming out, and you just want to select the player run. And then we're gonna want to do the same, because after we run, we'll probably want to go back to idle if the player is not moving anymore. So we're just gonna right click player run and select make transition and put it back. Now save it, make sure it's saved. So now we have a way of going from idle to run and from run to idle. But we actually didn't specify like what is the condition for it to change. If we make it to go now, right, you're gonna see that this goes into like some weird thing, okay? It goes into some weird looking thing. Hello? Please compile. Unity? Hello? Yeah, okay. Look at this. What is this? So, because it's always transitioning from idle to run and from run to back. So it's just gonna idle, run, idle, run, idle, run. So we don't want this to happen, okay? Obviously, this is not gonna be good in an actual game. We want it to only show the run animation when the player is actually running. And we want it to show the idle animation when the player is actually standing still. And the way to do this is to add what we call parameters. So these parameters would be the condition as to how we are going to change from one state to another. So we're able to pass these parameters inside. So to do that, we're just gonna click add, and for this we're gonna add a float. Okay, so you add a float, and we're gonna call this float a speed. So we're gonna call this float speed. So we're not gonna change the value, so we're just gonna leave it there. So now as you go here, you want to select this transition from idle to run, which is this line here. Okay, You select that, and you are going to see this conditions tab underneath. Okay? So you want to add a condition. Okay, you want to add a condition. So as speed is going to be greater than 0, which means we're actually going to be moving at that time, then we want this to go from idle to run. Okay? And contrary to that, if we're not moving, we want to go from run to idle. And to do that, we just need to select this arrow from run to idle, and then in conditions, add, and the speed, again, we are going to select less than 0.01. So if the speed is less than 0.01, we want it to stop. Okay, we don't want this to move anymore. Okay, so, but how am I supposed to let this animator know that what the current speed is? The way to do that is by writing more scripts. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our scripts, and I'm going to open up the player movement script. Okay, to make this a bit simpler for you guys. I'm not gonna make a new script because it might cause something to break. So here, I'm going to declare a private animator called anim in the player movement script. Okay, so once we have that, what we want to do is to go to here, okay, into update. So every single frame we are going to tell the animator whether or not our speed is, whether or not we're moving or we're not. And in this case, it's going to be whether or not our speed is greater than 0 or our speed is lesser than 0.01. So to do that, we're going to add a new line called anim.setFloat. So remember that we actually added a float parameter. So setFloat here is going to allow us to change the value of the parameter called speed inside of the animator. So you just want to go here, give this string speed. Make sure that the speed spelling is the same as the parameter you added. Okay, once you've added the speed, you want to change this to the current velocity. In the X position. So as we move horizontally, it's going to go from run to not run, from run to not run. Okay. But if you have already noticed, this component can either be positive or negative, right? Because if we move towards the right, it's positive X. We move towards the left, it's negative X. But even if we are moving towards the left, we still want the animation to show up there. Okay? But right now, our only condition is if it is greater than 0 and if it is less than 0.01. So is there any way for us to potentially get this working?
Make it the magnitude and not direction.
Magnitude and not direction? Close, but not exactly. It's in a similar concept. Think about something you learned in high school math. Absolute, yes. So we just need to make this the absolute value of velocity x. So even if it's negative, it's still going to be greater than 0.01. So to do that, we're going to use mathf.apps. This is a library provided internally by Unity that has some mathematics functions to it. So just call mathf.apps and this is going to change it to absolute value. Okay, cool. So now that we've done that, is anyone not following? Speed? Oh, it's inside the animator. In case if you missed it. Okay, is the script okay? I mean, it's just one line. So the speed is declared here. You click on add, you add a float, you name it speed. Don't touch the value and make sure that these conditions, speed greater than 0 is set up. Speed less than 0.01 is set up. So once you've done that, okay, all you need to do finally is to reference this animator, because right now it's an empty reference. So similar to how we do rigid body, we're just gonna anim equals get component animator. So as this starts, is going to get the component of animator, and then it's going to allow us to set float. Okay? Alright. Are we good? Are we good? Yes, no? Okay, cool. Alright, so these two lines of code, if there's no problem with it, now let's get back here and we're gonna see that this is gonna be idle. Okay, so far looks good, and as we move,
we need to
yes, we need to loop, correct. So we actually need to loop the player run animation. So let's do that. So go to player run, click on loop time. And now as we play, the moment of truth, we are running as we are supposed to run. Okay? And as we stop, we get into the idle animation. So you can see that this feels a little bit unresponsive right now. That's because there are some advanced properties in the animator that you need to tweak for it to be a little bit more responsive. I'm gonna touch into this if we actually still have some time after we finish up. So now we have an idle animation, we have a running animation. We probably need to have a jumping animation as well. If not, when we look at this, what is this gonna do? Like, look at this. It's gonna move. As we jump, it's gonna have the... Okay, it's doing cycling legs. Okay. So we need to have like some kind of jump animation to this. And luckily for us, the sprite is available. So as we get to here, you can see that there is a hero fly up and a hero fly down. So you just need to kind of mix this both together and it becomes a jump up animation. But I'm a bit lazy, so I'm not going to do 2 frames. I'm just going to do 1 frame here. So the process is practically similar. You go to animation, you right click, you create. Okay, you create an animation here, call it player jump. Okay, for this, we probably don't want it to loop, right? Because you're just going to be jumping up. And you jump down. And say if you have 2 frames, right? You jump up and then there's the jump down frame. What if you jump up for too long and it's just going to, you know, okay, it's not going to look very nice. So you don't want this to loop. You just want this to be here. And again, get back to your animator that has your player controller open. Drag and drop player jump into it. Once you're done with that, select player, change from player idle to player jump. So it's the same process. We're doing this for the third time. And we're just gonna go into hero. And we're just gonna pull this one frame into it, which is hero fly up. Okay, that's it. Now we have a jump animation. So now let's think about this. We're gonna be able to get from player idle to jump. Okay? We're also gonna be able to get from player run to jump. Right. So this means that if we're able to do that, since we only have idle and run, doesn't that mean that we can go from any state to jumping? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. No. Okay, so since we can get from idle to jumping, so we can go from shaking to jump. We can go from running to jumping. And since we only have idle and run in this state, in this animator diagram, doesn't it mean that we can go from any available state to jumping? Okay, at least the logic makes sense to me. So all we need to do is to go from any state to jump. Okay, and for this, we are also going to need to set a condition. Because if not, again, okay, this doesn't break, but that's okay. So we need to set some kind of condition to it. So what condition exactly? Right, so we want to think about it. So since we can set our speed to 0, we are also going to be able to set whether or not we are currently jumping. So for this, we're just going to change this to a bool. And this bool, we're just going to pull is jump. Save it. So for this transition to happen, we want to have the condition that is jump is true. But you're going to notice that as soon as we get to jump, there is no way for us to transition back to any one of these states. So what we want to do is to click on make transition, and then you want to make from player jump to player idle. Okay, we're just gonna stick to this. It's gonna be quite simple, and I'm not gonna make this transition. I don't think it's gonna be necessary for this workshop. So the condition to get from jump to idle is that as we are not jumping. So as is jump is false, we go from jump to idle. If is jump is true, we go from any state to jump. Okay, so far does this make sense? Cool. So now we also need to have a way to set what is jump, right? So essentially what we need to do is here. So as this is going to jump, we're going to do anim.setBool, okay, is jump to true. So as we jump, is jump true. But we also need to have a way to know whether or not we're on the ground. So whether or not we're actually not jumping now. So we're going to make use of what we have here. So if on ground is jump, okay, if on ground and we are in the state of jumping, okay, for that, right? Okay, no, we're not gonna do this. Yeah, we're not gonna do this. It's a bit too expensive. So to do this well, we're just going to add a void on collider enter 2D. On collision enter 2D. Okay? And when we do this, as we collide with another object, if it is the ground, then we are going to anim.setBool is jump to false. So if we can jump, this jump is true. As we collide and we touch the ground, this jump is false. Okay. Cool. Okay, so are we okay with this script? Now we are going to get back here. Yes. Move the cursor a bit. Why isn't this in update? Because if we put that in update, right, it's gonna be quite expensive to check if it's on ground. Yeah, the operation is quite expensive in terms of computation. You mean this? The reason why I put on ground the right side is because if this input is false, this check gets instantly terminated. It's short-circuited. It's a bit towards programming language at this point. I'm not going to go into the details, but that's something that you should know. Because in most programming language, if you have this double end check, right? If this left statement is false, it immediately terminates the entire if check. So it's not going to check on ground. And since on ground is a very expensive check, this is not going to get checked every single frame. It's only going to get checked if that frame, our spacebar is pressed down. Yes, that's the problem.
Have an error here for some reason.
Have an error here for some reason. You forgot a semicolon.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
I know it sounds complicated, but you're going to know more about it once you start getting into programming languages. Okay, so now we have this going. Let's click on play. Let's see if this works. So idle animation, run animation, jump animation. Okay, we did it. Okay, so now all the animations are in place. Okay, and you can play with all these kinds of different animations that is currently available to you. There's the hero sit by something, hero run, okay, and yeah, you can make use of all of these assets that are available to create more animations. And the creation process is just gonna be the same as what we did in the past 3 times. Okay, you create a new animation file, you attach that to the animator, and then you select the player, you change to the animation, you add the keyframe, and then if required, you add the condition to transition to that particular animation. Sounds good? Sounds good? Alright, so the final thing we're gonna do for today, because we actually still have 10 more minutes left, is to make this animation feel a bit more responsive. Because right now, it feels like there's a bit of lag time in between. And it depends on what kind of game that you're making. But for this game in particular, I don't think that is a very good experience, because it feels like you're lagging in behind. So in order to fix that, we want to go to our player, animator, and inside of this animator, right, you're going to notice that every single transition here, as you click on it, it has this pane. Correct? So in this pane, there is an exit time and the transition duration. So if you click for it to not have an exit time, and you change the transition duration to 0, okay, this is going to make it such that the animation doesn't exit, and it's going to get instantly transitioned over. So as we go, since we only changed from idle to move, right? If you look at this guy right now, as I move, it instantly changes over. And we can apply this same logic to every single one of the transition that we don't want to have some sort of latency. So we can go from idle to run. We can go from run to idle. Just turn off exit time and change the transition duration to 0. Okay? And go from any state to jump. For this, we are going to change the transition to 0 as well. Okay? And from jump to idle. So there is no exit time and our transition duration is 0. So as you have done all of these available settings, if we get back into the game, okay, this should feel way more responsive. Okay. So now as I move, it's going to have its correct animation, and as soon as I stop, the animation changes back to idle. And of course, the setting of this will depend on what kind of game that you're making. I mean, it's not really that hard. The reason why it's going to create that lag is because by default, Unity is going to add a so-called exit time for every single one of the animation transition. So it allows the previous animation to exit after a certain time period before the next animation can go on. And then there is the transition duration that is going to determine how long this transition is going to last. And during this transition duration period, both animation is going to overlap onto each other. And the previous animation is going to be shown before it changes over to the new animation. So by completely denying these two settings to affect with the animation timeline, we can make our animations more responsive. But it's a per game basis. It depends on what direction you're going with. For this game project that we have right here, we're gonna leave it at that way. Okay, so this just about wraps up for today's workshop. I mean, it's really not that much stuff compared to last session. Last session is kind of hell. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to talk briefly about Week 5 Game Jam. So this is going to be held next Saturday, which is Week 5 Saturday. And we're going to have a day-long game jam starting from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. So in that short about 10 hours time, you're going to form a group and we're going to give you a theme and you're going to work with about 4 to 5 people to complete an actual game within 10 hours. So this is going to put your development skills to a real test, and don't be worried, we're going to provide dinner, which right now is tentatively pizza. So if you're interested in actually trying to challenge yourself and you want to see like how far you can go with your current development skills, you can join us here. Okay. More details will be published. I think next week. Yes, more details will be published next week. So, yeah. And for this one, we are actually gonna go into using GitHub because you are going to be working with a team of 4 to 5, and without GitHub or any sort of version control, it will be very hard for you to collaborate. So if you're interested in joining Week 5 Game Jam, we're gonna have a GitHub session for Unity next week during GameStart. Okay, this here animation is just about the end for Unity related stuff in terms of beginners related knowledge. You have practically everything you need to know to make a basic game, and that is the game. So for GitHub integration, we're going to talk about it next session. If you're interested in joining the game jam, make sure you either watch the recording or you come join the session physically. Okay, what's the problem?
I think I broke my jump somehow.
There's no animated texture players in here. It's pretty shiny.
Okay, so if you guys have any question, yeah, that's the end. So next week is just gonna be GitHub, and the knowledge is gonna be useful for level 1 games, for project dev, for Week 5 Game Jam. So I would really advise you guys not to skip it. It's gonna be very important for it. All right, so that's the end. And if you guys don't have any questions, you are free to leave. Okay, good. Let me stop the recording.